In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I made the Rebecca Page Talia twist top that you can see me modeling here. So if you're interested, if you've already bought it or you would like to buy it, stay with me. I'm Christine of Christine's Crafts. So the first thing you're going to need is the pattern. So there's a link below the video so you can see where to go and buy it. It'll tell you how to print it off and how to cut it out. And I'm going to join you now once you've got your pattern and what you need to do with it. So you're going to take your fabric and you're going to lay it out flat, and then you're going to fold it in half. Now you want to make sure you fold it in half so your selvage edges are together and that it's nice and smooth on the floor or the table. Now you'll see I don't have a large enough table, so I'm cutting out on the floor. And those of you that do that will feel my pain. There's a lot of crawling around. So once you've laid your fabric out, you're going to put your pattern pieces in place. Now you need to make note of which way the arrows point on your pattern pieces so they're in the right direction, and you need to make sure the back is up against the fold of your fabric. So you'll see all this information on your pattern pieces. They do tell you, and then you just want to lay them out. Now I've laid them out so that the bit of fabric I'm left with is as large as possible. Once you're happy with your layout, you need to use pattern weights, which again, there's a link below so you can see a video how to make your own, or you can pin them all on. It's entirely up to you. You don't need any spare space around your pattern pieces because they include your seam allowance already. Now you'll see that I've used pattern weights, and then when it's come to the neck binding, I'm using pins, simply because it's so small, it's just not going to hold it well with the weights. So make sure you're happy and that everything is in the right direction, and then start cutting out. So you're simply going to cut around each piece in turn, and you don't cut anything extra, your seam allowance is included. So I make sure I pin the pattern piece onto the fabric, just so I know what's what and which is the right and wrong side. So that's good practice. It's not essential, but it's good practice so that you don't have any confusion later. If you've got fabric like mine, it's not obvious which is the right and wrong side. It's important to make sure you always know which is the right side, because you might come later when you've made it and realise you sewed some bits one way and some bits the other, and it will suddenly become obvious. So just the sleeves left, and you can see I'm having to crawl around, move one side to another, just to make sure you get all of it cut out nicely. And there you go, you've got all your pieces, and it's time to get started. So check you've got them all, and then off we go. So the first thing we're going to need is that neck binding, and that's what we're going to attach to the back piece. So as I take the pattern piece off, you'll see I'm just marking which is the right side. Okay, because you do want to know on each of your pattern pieces so you don't get into difficulties. So move the other bits to one side, and I'll show you how you're going to attach that neck binding to your back. So again, I've taken the back piece here, and I am just going to mark so I know which is the right side. So let's take that back and lay it out on our table with the neckband. Now you'll see when you look at this that one does look a lot smaller than the other, but don't worry, it's going to work. So get your neckband, fold it in half, and mark the center. This is going to help you to ease everything so it sits nicely and you don't end up with too much fabric at one side or the other. It's just going to be a bit squiffy. I'll just put the pin back in so it's straight. And then with the back, you're going to need to know where the center of that is, because you're going to match that up with the center of the neckband. So I just brought my pins. You'll see that I interchangeably work between pins and clips, and it really doesn't matter. It's a personal preference. I just sometimes find one easier than the other. So you'll see that I've placed that back right side up, and I'm not happy with it. I've turned it over right side down. Okay, I've now taken my neckband and placed it right side down. So I've got the back right side down and the neck right side down. And then match up those centers that you marked and pin or clip the two together. So I'm moving to my clips. And then take your neckband at one end and clip it to the end of the neck edge of the back. Again, pin or clip. Do the same at the opposite end. And you can now see that you're going to have to ease that back to fit along that neck. So you'll see you just pull it a little bit, get that easing going. Make sure your edges stay together. Quite often with a stretchy fabric, which you need to be making this out of, your edges curl. So you just have to keep straightening them, flattening them down, and making sure they're lined up. So just keep working your way along. You've got those 3 key points already clipped or pinned, and you're just working between them. And you should then get it worked in nicely. And you can see it'll just hold beautifully. So then it's time to take it over to the machine and sew that seam. So remember, throughout the whole thing, you are using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So make sure you set up your machine so that you can see where 3/8 of an inch is. You might need to use a guard or a guide, or you might just be able to use the lines on your sewing machine. But pop your fabric in and make sure you've got that 3/8 of an inch. Run a few stitches and then reverse to make it hold. Now, whenever you're sewing stretch fabric, as you'll have seen on the pattern, you should be using a stretch stitch, or if you've got a very basic machine like me, a slight zigzag stitch. And this is so that your seams don't rip when your fabric stretches. So once you've set that to be the right size for you, and you're going to get a nice seam, a nice zigzag, keep your machine set at that and sew everything on this project with that zigzag. And it'll just mean everything can flex and move as you wear it and you won't rip them. So just keep working your way along. You'll notice throughout this sew along that my little finger sticks up in the air. I have no idea why. I didn't know I did it until I started filming myself. It's amazing what you find out when you do videos. So when you get to the end, do a little reverse just so it can't come undone. And that's your first seam done. You're well and truly underway. So just cut your threads off. A lot of these little details I won't necessarily show you on every single seam, but just cut your threads off at either end. Just makes for a nice tidy job and not having them caught in seams later. Okay, so you've got a nice little zigzag along there and it'll stretch. See, stretches quite happily. Okay, so now you're going to finish off that neckband by pressing it and then sewing it again. So press the seam allowance up into the neckband. You can see, just taking your time, work your way along, make sure it's all pressed up into the neckband. And that just means it'll sit nicely as you sew that neckband over and get a nice tidy job. So take one end and do a little fold and then another one. So you're doing a double fold. Okay, and then pin it or clip it. So your raw edge came down to meet the raw edge of the back, and then you fold the binding again to make sure you cover the raw edges. So you won't be able to see any raw edges and it will just nicely come onto the seam you've already done. So it'll be really tidy and everything will be enclosed. So again, you'll notice I did it at either end and then in the center because again, you've still got that curve, you're still going to have to ease things in. So I've sped it up a little bit because you'll see it takes me a little bit of time to do this. Yep, not happy with it, undo it, go again. And I really do recommend taking your time. A curved binding like this is a little bit tricky, and sometimes you just have to keep adjusting things until you are happy. Adding more pins, more clips, just making sure you're confident before you go anywhere near the sewing machine. Let's do this side. And you can start to see how it's going to look. And you want that lovely curve, and you don't want any of your fabric puckering up. So once you're happy with it, it's time to sew all the way along. So we're still using that slight zigzag stitch. So you're just going to go just on that edge. So perhaps one side of your zigzag will go just off the binding and one side just on. And make sure you stick nice and close. So take your time and work your way along. Now every time you take a pin out, you may have to adjust. You may have to just make sure nothing's moved. I can't stress enough to take your time with this. Now it'll look like I'm going really fast, but that's because I speed the film up a little bit so that you don't get bored. But do take time with this. It's an important seam, and you're going to be able to see it forever. So you can see I just had to take my time there and adjust the binding. And then when you get all the way to the end, you're going to just do your little reverse as normal and cut all your threads, keeping tidy as we go. You can see I've had to lift the foot there just to get my binding back down how I want it. And there we go. Made it to the end. So next you're going to take that back and you're going to fold up your hem. So you're going to press 1/2 inch hem. So you'll see that I've measured it, and then I've gone to the middle and measured again. And then I recommend going to the other end and measuring again. It's just going to mean you get a nice straight edge along that bottom because you don't want it wandering off. And then you'll probably just be able to use your iron to hem in between. Now, if you can't get it to lie flat in between, don't worry about it. Measure it all the way along. And once you've got that hem nicely folded, you can turn it over and see how it's going to look. Then it's time to sew it. So again, this is one way you've got an edge to sew along, and just make sure you sew all the way along and capture it all in, and your zigzags can go either side. You're always going to see this, so take your time and make it neat. And that really is your back piece done and ready. And so we will put it to one side and work on the front pieces next, which is a little bit more complicated, but don't be put off. So take your front pieces and remove your pattern piece. And again, we need to know which is the front of both of them. So make sure you mark both front pieces. Some people use tailor's chalk or a little marker pen. It's up to you. I just tend to mark mine with a pin. So you're going to have to take your two front pieces and you're going to lie one on top of the other with right sides together. Okay, so right sides are facing each other. And then take your time just to get them so that they are lying flat and that you've got everything right, because they are unusual shaped pieces. That's the word we're going to use. And you can see here, we're going to run a seam from the shoulder seam, which we haven't done yet. And we're going to run it down all the way to the little corner there and then along to the other side. So you'll notice that I'm going to clip that corner And I can see then that that side's laying nicely. Put a couple more clips in. And then lie that edge flat, clip either end and clip. We happy? Yeah. So now we're just going to repeat that exactly the same on the other side. And nice. Make sure the edges are together. Make sure nothing's curled up. And then both of those seams need to be sewn. So once you've got them both clipped, it's over to the sewing machine and sew along, both of them. So over we go, the usual arrangement. Get yourself started and a little reverse so that it holds it in place. There you go, and then work your way along. So just make sure you keep that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance so that everything fits together beautifully as we move on. You'll find when you get to that corner, it's not so dramatic that you have to pivot the machine. You can probably just push the fabric round. If you prefer to lift the foot and pivot, you can do, but I found you didn't need to because it's not a really sharp corner. And then finish off properly at the end. So we'll get rid of those threads and then repeat for the other seam, which obviously is exactly the same. So just remember your 3/8 of an inch and reverse at the beginning and then work your way around in exactly the same way. So then before you turn this out, clip into those corners. So you just need a little bit of clipping. Make sure you don't catch your seam so it all unravels, but it's just going to make it turn nicely at the corner. Otherwise it can pull a little bit tight, get a little bit bulky. So that clipping is a really important step. And then turn it the right way out. Okay, so we can see which is the right and the wrong side now. I can take those pins out. Because of the seams we've sewn, it's obvious which is the right way out. Pull it through and then you need to press it. You need to get those seams nice and flat so that your front is all ready for the next step. So we're now going to need the front and the back. So you can take your back and you're going to put it right side up, and then we're going to take our front and we're going to sew one shoulder seam. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to open up your front shoulder seam, because remember you haven't sewn it on the arm side, so we've still got it there. Okay, and you're going to wrap it around the back shoulder seam, so you can see how it's going to go there. Open it up and wrap it around that shoulder seam there, around the back. Now I've left this without speeding it up because you can see how I'm having to be really careful to line up that side seam from the front with the neck edge of the back. And then once you're happy, pin it or clip it. And that is going to form the shoulder seam, because we're going to sew the two front pieces around the back shoulder. You can see mine's just not quite right. I'm not happy with it, and I want you to feel confident to keep doing this until you are happy with it, so that you get a really nice shoulder at the end. We really don't want it to not line up. So a bit happier this time. So take it over to the machine and sew it. Still got our 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're just sewing that really nice short seam and it's just going to trap the back between the two front pieces and form that shoulder. So again, reverse at the start, sew it along it, making sure nothing's moving, making sure nothing's going out the way, especially as you take your final pin or clip out. Just hold on to everything, and then a little reverse at the end. So now before you turn that out, it's worth clipping that corner. You're just reducing the bulk so that you get a nicer, cleaner looking shoulder seam when you turn it out. So as you'll see, as you turn it through, it can just sit nicely because you've got rid of the bulk on that edge. So now we need to turn our attention to the other shoulder. So you can lie it down there. You can see that one's sewn. It's the right side out. It looks great. So now we need to simply flip the other one up and do the same thing again. And you can start to see how that twist is going to appear in the center of your top. So we're going to repeat the process. We're going to open up the front and wrap it around the back, making sure it all lines up perfectly. And you can see it quite often doesn't want to. Stretchy fabric curls. So just take your time. And clip it or pin it. And then, if I can keep hold of it, double check that you're happy with it. Yep, you can see that's going to be right. Over to the machine and sew this the same as the last one. So just pop it in, usual reversing, and sew along. And that's one of the tricky bits done on this top, that working out how to wrap the shoulder seams so that they sew and are completely enclosed. It's one of the tricky bits, and you've done it. Okay, so again, remember to clip before turning it through. So now we've got our back sewn to our front. It's starting to look like a top, but we haven't got any shoulder seams. So start from one side and roll your whole top up really tight. You're basically forming a burrito roll. And then you're going to take that front piece, which remember is two pieces of fabric, and one of them you're going to wrap back around your roll. And then the other one and the back piece of fabric, you're going to keep rolling the same way. So they're going to wrap around and enclose your roll of top. Now, if you need to, rewind and watch that again. But what's happening is you're ending up with all three edges together wrapped around your roll. And take your time to get all three. So remember, your front piece has got two pieces of fabric, and there's the back. So I would recommend clipping it at the top of the seam like I have done there, and then trying to get another little bit done just so it's nice and secure. And then think about the bottom. You need to make sure everything's lined up perfectly. So just take a little bit of time, poke things through, pull your seam so that it straightens and you get rid of some of those curls on the edges. And just keep working your way until you've got it all pinned or clipped. So the bottom, it's very important to make sure the back piece lines up exactly into the bottom where your two front pieces are sewn together already. And that will give you the perfect finish on the side of your top. And then anything in between that you haven't pinned yet, just go back and pin it. And you should have a whole seam pinned. Now just make sure you haven't caught any of the rolling. We don't want any of that caught in the seam, so just give it a little wiggle and a little feel, and then it's over to the machine to sew it. So it can be a little bit tricky because you've got all that roll there trying to push into the way, and we don't want any of it in the way. So you'll see I'm just making some time to push it out of the way. So remember your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to start as we normally do with a little bit of reverse. So we go forwards and reverse, and then you're going to sew up this seam. Now take your time. Keep feeling it, keep checking nothing's wandered into the way, keep checking all your edges are level, and if they're not, adjust them. You'll see I keep doing that. This is no time to be whizzing up with your machine. And just keep going all the way up to the top of that seam. And a little bit of reverse. So then we'll cut our threads as normal. Get that tidied. Now, at that bottom edge, you will see you've got a little corner. It's worth trimming it off. You don't want any excess bulk. So just trim that corner off. Just making sure you're not too close to your seam. If you've got any extra bits there you don't want to, you think it's a bit wide, you can trim it down a bit, but you don't need to. And then it's time to turn it out. And you really will start to see your top appearing, because you've now got one side seam all sewn. The front sewn to the back, and it's all invisible. So we're going to do the same to the other side now. So you're going to have to do your burrito roll again, but this time from the opposite side. So start again, take a nice tight roll, and I'll show you this again. So you can take one of your front pieces and wrap it around the roll, and then the other one is going the other way with the back piece. So now you've got to get all three lined up again, just like you did before, and secure it. And then work your way down the whole thing. So I've sped it up this time because you've already seen this. But I think it's important to show you everything. So we just keep going. Make sure it's lined up beautifully in the bottom there. Again, we want to make sure we get a nice edge. We don't want any gaps. And then once you're happy with it, again, check you haven't caught any of the roll in. It's over to the machine and repeat what you did for the other side. So a little reverse at the end, and then run up your seam. Again, making sure you don't catch the roll. And a little reverse at the end. So again, clip corners, you don't want any bulk, anything that's extra, and then turn everything through so it's all the right way out. And you've got a top, but no sleeves. So you can see what's coming next. We're just going to have to sort those sleeves out and pop those in. Looking good. So yours should look like this, just needing to sort those sleeves. So the first thing you're going to do with each sleeve is you're going to form something called a memory hem at the bottom. So what that means is you're going to fold the hem as if you're going to sew it. So the hem should be 1/2 inch. So again, I've got my ruler, check at one end. Press 1/2 inch. I'm in the middle, still 1/2 inch. And you're going to press this all the way along. And it's just so that your sleeve knows where the hem is going. So it means when you come to hem it later, it'll be a lot easier and you'll get a much better finish. So you've pressed one, then you're just going to repeat the whole process with the other sleeve to form a memory hem again. So get it down flat and press that 1/2 inch onto the wrong side. Again, just measure your 1/2 inch wherever you feel you need to. And then you're going to unfold those hems. Now they'll keep wanting to fold up. You've just got to remember to keep unfolding them. So in turn, take each sleeve and fold it in half lengthways with right sides together. Okay, so you can see where I'd marked it with the pin, so I know the right sides together, and clip it at the top. And then just work your way down and clip or pin it all the way along the length of the sleeve. And the important thing here when you get to the bottom is that that memory hem needs to be unfolded. We want to sew all the way to the bottom without the hem in place. So as you're getting down there, you can see I've got mine unfolded. And you can see that I'm always making sure those curled up edges are uncurled again. So yeah, get that hem open and then clip that one. So once you're happy with that sleeve, guess what's coming next? Take the other sleeve and fold it in half with the right sides together and run down the length of this sleeve and just clip it or pin it so that that seam is held nicely. And again, remember to make sure your memory hem's open. And then it's over to the machine and sew those nice straight hems. So again, reverse at the beginning and the end to secure them. But these are really nice, easy hems. So if you are a speedy sewer, you're going to find these really quick to just run down. And again, you get to the bottom, make sure that hem's not folded and do a little reverse. Cut your threads off and repeat the whole process for the other sleeve. The easiest part of your sleeves, I'm sure you'll agree. Again, just check that memory hem, it's down. So then once you've got both sleeves sewn, we're going to actually sew the hem. Now it's done in this order so that you end up with a nice edge all the way around the bottom of your hem. Now you're going to be so glad you pressed it well because your hem will just naturally go to where it's supposed to be. So open up your seam allowance so that it's flat, it'll just give you a nice better finish. And pin and then go opposite there. You want to be opposite your seam and pin or clip in between. And it's just so it holds it all for you. You can see, yeah, that didn't sit nicely, so I've just moved my pin to there. And that's really the way to do it. To pop your fingers in the end of the sleeve and keep adjusting so that it's fitting nicely. If it's all sitting nicely while you're pinning it now, it probably will when you sew it. So it's worth taking that little bit of time. And then you're just going to repeat that whole process with the other hem. And then we're going to sew them on the machine. Now how that goes depends on your machine. A lot of machines like mine have a section that pulls off and you have a narrow bit. You could put the whole sleeve around it. Now unfortunately mine's too wide, but I have had a machine in the past with a very narrow section and then you could make this a lot easier. But if like me you're stuck with just doing it all on the top, just be very careful not to catch the other side of the sleeve in at any time. So you're just going to set off and sew along that hem edge so that you catch it all in, and you're going to work steadily round. The only real danger here is catching the back of the sleeve in because it's such a small circle, so just keep pulling it out and keep making sure. We're not on the time for rushing here. So work your way all the way around until you get back to where you started, and then make sure you sew over the start of your stitches and then do a little reverse so it'll catch both the start and the finish of your seam in one little set of reverse. And then cut your threads off, and then we need to finish the other sleeve. So you're going to do exactly the same thing. Pop it under the machine, work your way all the way around. Again, just making sure that you don't catch the back in, and work steadily round. And remembering to go over the start of your stitching and then do your reversing and catch it all in one go. And then you've got two sleeves, both finished and ready to attach to the body. So you're going to take the body, it's all right side out, and then you're going to get your sleeves in turn. You're going to take each one and you're going to get the sleeve the right side out and feed it down in through the top. So it's going to go in through the sleeve hole, down through. And then you're going to look for that seam, open it up, and you're going to line it up with your side seam. And when you line up that side seam and the bottom seam of your sleeve, what you're doing is positioning the sleeve perfectly. And then it's a case of fitting the sleeve into the armhole. Now, take your time. I tend to put a clip in the top, even though I will move it, it just gives me a feel for it and stops it all wandering around. I guarantee I'll move that clip. So then you're going to work steadily around that sleeve and clip up in it in place. Now just be careful that when you're doing the front, you obviously have two pieces of fabric from the front. So you're clipping three pieces of fabric together. On the back, you've just got two pieces, but when you get to the front, you've got three. So as we've done earlier, just take your time and make sure that you're lining it up. None of those curled edges, nothing's disappearing. Remember, it'll be very visible, so you want it to look good. We don't want any puckers or stretched bits. So then when you get to the top, see that clip's not right. It doesn't matter, it just held it there for me. So you can see as I come around the top, I'm going on to the front and I've now got three pieces of fabric. So just make sure you do catch all three and keep all three level. So as you're doing this, working your way around these sleeves, we're obviously getting close to the end of this, and I just want to remind you that below the video you will find links to go and buy this pattern so that you can make your own, and also you find links to my video that shows you how to make your own pattern weights so that you can try those out if you've never used them before. It's a great way of using up fabric scraps, and then you end up with some very useful weights. If you've been enjoying this sew along and think you might like some of my other videos, then please do subscribe to my channel. And if you've enjoyed this, give me a thumbs up, and I'd love it if you wrote in the comments how you got on with your TALIA twist top. So as you can see, I'm just going to do the other sleeve now, and I've sped it right up because I'm hoping that you've worked out what you're doing on the first one and that you're just going to repeat for the second one. Just take your time and take care. And then all we've got left to do is to take this to the machine and sew around these armholes. And I'm just going to give you a few pointers when you get there. So again, we're sewing around a curve, so it can be a little bit tricky. It's also tricky because you've got the whole top now and you don't want to catch any bits in. So I recommend you start at the back of the sleeve, quite low down, and then it's just easier for you to work your way around the back first where you've only got 2 layers of fabric. You can see I'm just adjusting it all and making sure everything's lying smoothly. And then once you're happy and you get started, again, you don't need to reverse at the start because you're working on a circle. So you can go over it when you get round there. Remember to keep your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and work all the way around. If any of your levels you think are wandering, just pull them back into line and work your way around. Once you get back to where you started, make sure you go over those stitches to catch them and do a little reverse. And then cut off your threads and repeat for the other sleeve. So again, just take that time. If things don't seem right, take a moment just to get them right. Much easier at that point than once you've sewn. You don't want to get friends with your quick unpick. So work your way around. And then really it's just time to say congratulations, because at that point you have finished your TALIA twist top. So I hope you'll enjoy wearing it, and I hope you've really enjoyed making it. And all that's left to say is please subscribe if you're enjoying my videos. Please take a look around and watch some others, and good luck with all your sewing for the future. So thank you for watching.